Get started. Okay. I hate man-made stone structures around the swamp.
Recording in progress.
Feel free to speak up when I step on my left foot. Fine.
Okay,
Good evening. I'd like to call the regular meeting of the Village of New Paltz Planning Board of April 15th to order. And we're going to go through our administrative business first. First thing.
Can you please tell me where your meeting is? I'm outside. I thought it was at Village Hall. I'm trying to find the meeting. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Where are you?
it is at Village Hall. Come to the Plattekill side. It's at the door 25 Plattekill next to the old firehouse.
Next to the firehouse. Okay, I'll find it. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I've been banging at the door here. I didn't know where it was. Okay, thank you.
No, you're on the wrong side of the building. Just come around the side of the building.
Okay, the side by the firehouse,
Yes,
where the old court building, the
correct.
courthouse, go in the
Next to
courthouse
it.
door?
Yep.
The courthouse door. Okay, thank you.
Okay, first.
Logan.
Approval of the minutes of our meeting of April 1st, 2025. Has everyone had a chance to look at them? Any additions, corrections? Hearing none, can I hear?
I have one.
Yes.
I do have one question.
Mhm.
No, throughout the whole thing. you
And
referred
I'm sorry, could you turn off your phone or mute because you're giving us an echo? Thank you.
to Ms. Benson and Mr. Sudo, but you refer to Nikki Nielsen. Could you refer to me as Ms. Nielsen?
Oh, sure.
Everybody, my first and last, it just stands out.
Yeah, I usually start out that way and then if I carry the name over, but yeah, absolutely. Problem.
Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, hearing none, is approved. We might have some updates from the village board. Good evening.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming in this evening. Just a quick announcement that, training announcement that on April 29th, the Learning Lunch Program is going to have a seminar on climate resilience planning in the Hudson region. And since it's kind of localized that topics, I thought that was interesting. If you haven't received it today, when you see it.
In their packet. That's okay.
Thank you. Anything from the Environmental Policy Board?
Yes. The Environmental Policy Board met on Thursday. And, discussed, writing a letter, in response to, 147, 149/151 North Chestnut Street. And then, one of the issues was, getting a better idea of what was going to be planted and where the wetlands were. And so they wrote a letter and, we approved of it over email, but it was just sort of a general letter expressing our interest. And then when all the new information came in with the, new site plan with all the trees and everything, I sent those over to them and they're taking a look at it, and they just want to know that they're taking a look at it and then they're gonna respond.
Very good. Anything from our director of planning?
Just to let you know, there's two potential trainings coming up, the one that Bill mentioned. And, there is an Ulster Strong Housing Summit on Thursday, May 15th from 5:30 to 7. If anybody attends either of these, just let me know and we'll make sure you get credit for the training hours. Planning Federation usually will send you a certificate, but with these Learn at Lunches, I'm not sure if they do or don't, but we sort of operate on the honor system. So if you've attended, let me know. And, those certainly count toward your training hours for the year. That's all I have.
Good, thanks. Do we have anything from the town planning board?
I did not get time to check their current agenda, so I apologize on that. Yep.
Anything else for the good of the order? Hearing none. We'll go into a public comment period. Now, the public comments, we're looking for comments for things other than the projects for which we're going to have public hearings. So anybody here or online that wants to make a public comment?
There's nobody signed up for agenda.
Okay. I don't see anybody online. Okay, very good. Then, first thing we're going to do, well, the first public hearing we're going to have is on application PB 25-07, which is 52 North Chestnut Street. I need a motion to open the public hearing. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed, hearing none. It passes and the public hearing is open.
Okay, I have no one signed up for the public hearing. If anyone is online to speak, but
Hearing nothing, do I hear a motion?
is there anyone online who wishes to speak? You can unmute yourself or raise your hand. Here's not.
I see no reason really to. This. So, do I hear a motion to close the public hearing? Second,
Second.
all in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye, opposed, hearing none. Public hearing is closed.
You have a decision, I'm sorry to interrupt, this is a little different order than usual, but it's set up so that we can do the decision right away on this one before we move on to the following it.
So this,
Yeah, given that we have 3 public hearings tonight, I thought that this would speed up the process a little bit.
so now this is a resolution of approval for site plan for 52 North Chestnut Street. Application number PB 25-07. Do I hear a motion for approval?
So, second,
All in, what? For this, we need a roll call, I think.
Sure. Rachel?
Aye.
Nikki?
Aye.
Karen?
Aye.
Okay. You are all set, Mr. Vet. Thank you.
Is the applicant here today?
He's, yeah, he's online.
This is another public hearing.
You have the next decision lined up. This is just a little different order that we talked about in the pre-meeting, but it's two enough. You see the 2 decisions early on, so this.
Oh,
So the other decision is 81 to 83 North Chestnut,
okay.
and that does have a few conditions that you could.
Okay, this is a resolution of approval for an amended site plan and special use permit for 81-83 North Chestnut Street, application CB 2504. Do I hear a motion?
So.
Second?
Second.
We need to read it. The specific conditions? Yep. Number one, planters around the dining area shall be neatly maintained with live plants during the growing season. Two, the outdoor cafe use shall be operated in accordance with the requirements of section 212-41J, including being closed to patrons no later than 11 p.m. Number three, the applicant is responsible for moving an existing ADA parking space from next to the restaurant to in front of the physical therapy building as depicted on the site plan and installing appropriate pavement marking and signage. Number four, the color of the benches installed for the outdoor seating shall be brown, tan, or natural wood. Number five, all conditions attached to the prior resolution of approval, which was PB 0454, approved on February 8th, 2005, are made part of this approval. The sidewalk agreement noted included on the previous site plan shall be added to the amended site plan. Do I have a roll call?
Sure. Rachel?
Aye.
Nikki?
Aye.
Terry?
Aye.
Okay, you're all set.
You can work with next to get.
And if you could let Luke know, you can just get me the drawings at his convenience.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Thank you very much.
And anything I sign to take.
We'll get it to you.
Okay, amazing. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Okay, I think we're back to public hearings.
Correct.
Okay, another public hearing on PB 25-06. This is at 14 Lincoln Place. Do I hear a motion to open the public hearing?
So moved.
Second,
Second,
all in favor, signify by saying aye.
I,
Opposed, hearing none. The public hearing is open. Anybody?
We have two people signed up. The first speaker is Flip Gertler. You want to come up to the table?
My wife and I reside at 22 South Anthony. Goes right up to 14, which it's my backyard is their side yard. I'm well aware of the project. I know that there has been some changes to the project. The original request was for a 4-bedroom house addition, which changed the policy of the plan at this point. Our concern is that route that is 14 Lincoln Place and a continuation around which is Flatiron Avenue. That's predominantly family-owned housing. We're well aware that student housing in this town is a big problem, right? But the plan that's being put forth here is moving from basically it's listed as a 2-bedroom house right now, about 1,000 square feet. The second bedroom is barely a bedroom currently. It's going to go to a 3-bedroom. You know, the size of the house is really doubled. Yeah, I think it's even more than that. So 1,000 to 2,100 square feet. I don't know that that's an intent of the housing point, which seems to be it's a very large student housing place. Smack it up. Again, student housing is obviously an issue around here, but when I don't know that is. Just want to make sure that is really falls into 3 bedrooms and stuff like that. Because when I look at those plans, there are certain things in there that easily could be converted into 4 bedrooms and 5 bedrooms and put in much more people than 3 into that place. A little concerning that I think the intent was to purchase it for a college student who is obviously their daughter, that's their friends possibly. But what happens in 3 years? That becomes a massive money making student housing building. So definitely some concerns. The house that we currently live in has been in my wife's family since inception. Her grandfather built it. And those houses there, the neighbors that we've had in those houses were almost 70-year neighbors from obviously since it passed on. But just very concerning where, you know, the village is surrounded by student housing, and this is a very large building. Just want to make sure that if it says 3 bedrooms, it stays 3 bedrooms, and that when the inspections occur, that there's really just that amount of people living there, because going from 1,000 square feet to 2,400 square feet is definitely concerning when my backyard is probably 30, 40 feet to their house. So with, a second reality narrative between the two of us. So that's it, that's pretty much it.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
The next name, Chad, is it Sermon?
Yes.
Serman? Thank you.
My wife and I and our two kids, recently moved to 16 Market Place, which is a house that needs to this one, 14th Place. And so we're one of the four houses right on that block, that's right across from the middle school. And it's very much a family stretch of the street still. And our kids can go to that middle school next coming year after. So, we really kind of hoping that it will be a great place to have our kids run around with the playground, tennis court that are right there, and just be safe. But I feel like this development of the property could be turned this part of the street into a real college student area, and it just could be a conflict with environments. I feel like when you kind of have a middle school kind of environment that's safe for the kids, it just could start changing. I feel like this turned into a large student housing property. So we don't know what the legalities are for what they're proposing. So we're not sure if it's within the code or not, what's the code. They're asking for a variance, but if they are asking for a special permission, we'll hope that it will get turned out.
That's all that are signed up.
Yep. Do I hear a motion? Well. Can you explain? I think we should close it myself. Okay, do I hear a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Second, all in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Rachel,
Yes.
any opposed? Hearing none. Public hearing is closed.
Sure. The next action, if you chose to, you could authorize the attorney to write a decision, or if you wanted to wait to discuss it further, you can do that. Even if she writes a decision, you'll still have discussion at the next meeting. So I just put that out there.
So this, just to clarify, because this agenda is a little different than usual, this is kind of set up so that we do each thing in all at one, each application at one time, rather than doing all the public hearings first and then talking about the applications.
Oh,
So, would you want to go ahead and talk about this application now?
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the reason we did that is the 147, 149 public hearing could be very lengthy, and we didn't want to keep the other people waiting till after all the public hearings to be heard. So,
That's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine. Sure. Is the applicant?
he's online.
So now we're going into application review. Is that what we're doing?
Yeah.
Okay, the applicant is represented by who?
Gary, you
Gary
can unmute
Singleton.
if you're there.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
So my understanding is that this went to the zoning board and the zoning, they asked for 4 bedrooms and the zoning board said no, but 3 bedrooms is permissible.
Exactly, so the code requires,
Yeah, but just to clarify, the zoning board didn't say no. The applicant withdrew the application because the zoning board indicated that it was unlikely it would pass. They didn't actually say no. It didn't get to public hearing. They just recommended to the applicant that they withdraw their,
This does not require.
does not require a variance.
so the code requires a different area of land depending on the number of bedrooms. I just explained this because the person asked, but I guess they're not here anymore. So this piece of land is big enough for a 3-bedroom house without a variance. If they wanted 4 bedrooms, would have needed one. So the applicant has gone back to the 3-bedroom proposal, but the board is certainly free to put a condition on the approval saying that it can only be used for 3 bedrooms, especially considering that the land is not large enough for a 4-bedroom.
So that would be a special condition of approval, and then does that, like, basically you rely on the building department to enforce that code going forward?
Correct.
But you could make that a special condition, like, you know,
Yeah.
if we can, I'm open to that.
Yeah, that would be fine. Let me ask you a question about the inspections of rental property. Does every rental property get an annual inspection?
Every rental property does. However, if this is being owned by one person for their daughter to stay there, it may and I'm not going to assume it will or won't be a rental property. It could just be 3 people living together and not a rental situation. A rental is where there is a landlord who owns the property and they're collecting rent from the people there. So in the case that what the applicant has presented is this is where his daughter is going to live, I just want to point out, don't make the assumption that it will be a rental property. In future, it might be, but the way he has presented it right now, it may or may not be.
The daughter's living there and there are 2 people paying rent, that does not make it a rental property.
If they may or may not be paying rent, I mean, they might all just be the 3 of them. It's no different than 3 people, 3 friends choosing to live together and splitting expenses. That's my point, is it may not be a specifically as a rental. There's very defined thing for it to be a rental. There's a lease, the only reason I'm bringing this up is because it may or may not be a rental. But certainly if it's mandated to be 3 bedrooms, that condition stays enforceable no matter what.
Okay, is it possible? Go ahead. No,
No, I was gonna say that, so the condition that's only to be used as a 3-bedroom dwelling doesn't seem to mean very much. Then.
No, it absolutely means if we go in and inspect or if we have a complaint that there is more than 3 bedrooms being used there, we can certainly explore within the legal rights of what we have as a building to pay.
Theoretically.
No, that would be, nobody can create a bedroom without a building permit. So if a bedroom is created in any residence in the community without a building permit, we have grounds to issue a violation.
Seems like then what's to stop the house from being filled with 15 people who are, maybe just sharing expenses and maybe not, and it feels like a real rental unit that should be subject to the rental laws, but it doesn't, like, if that's not a specific condition. I think that's what you're saying, Rachel, right? Like, how do you, even if you don't construct extra wall,
Mhm.
the concern that's being expressed is a legitimate one.
Well, it's this, go ahead, Emily.
The building code prescribes, right, the number
Number of people that can be per bedroom.
I think it's 2 people per bedroom.
I don't know off the top of my head, but the building code does subscribe for every residential property in everywhere in New York State, not just New Paltz. So
They couldn't list it, for example.
absolutely not. And if we saw that it was being listed as a rental, then we would have every right to pursue a problem, a violation. Yeah. I just wanted to point out though, that if it is not being rented, and I'm not saying you should decide one way or the other based on that, because the applicant has been very forthcoming in what he's prescribing. But it's essentially, it could just be 3 people living. I mean, the applicant is on, you could ask him, But I don't know if that really comes into zoning. That's up to Emily, whether that's a zoning question or not.
Well,
So,
the issue is that once it's approved, then it goes on,
Right.
indefinitely, no matter who owns it.
Right.
So
Yeah,
It's not so much about us. it's-
appreciate the candor
Yeah.
of the applicant, but I
Yeah.
think that the people who spoke here tonight had legitimate concerns and
Mhm.
putting it into an approval should reflect an attempt to address.
And it will. I'm just trying to be very clear in what we have the legal authority to do and not do. So,
Like we can look into what the number of people would be for a 3-bedroom,
mhm.
before the next meeting.
You know, experience tells me that one of the things, and this is I'm not disparaging the applicant here. I'm just looking at the property and trying to address the concerns of the neighbors. Well, one of the things that often happens with, quote, student housing, it happens with all kinds of housing, by the way, not just student housing. The dining room becomes a bedroom, but there's no alteration whatsoever to the dining room. There's just a bed in the dining room. That's all it is. It happens all the time.
Mhm.
So if we can put a special condition that really just enforces the fact that this is a 3-bedroom house, can we put a special condition on this house and maybe other houses that says it will be inspected every year?
No,
You can't.
we don't have the right to inspect a single family house. And that's what this is a single family house. Unless it is a rental. If it is a rental and if we have information that it is a rental, we can then say, we believe this is a rental, prove to us that it's not. But we can't just walk into anybody else's house who is saying we're a single family and say, oh, you have 4 bedrooms, you're only supposed to have 3.
Yeah.
With that being said, though, and Emily can certainly advise you better, I don't know that the board has the ability to rationalize rental versus family owned in zoning. And I'll leave that to Emily to advise you, but you have to treat the use, which is a single family house. I'm not advocating one way or the other, but just advising.
Yeah. Look, I'm just telling you what experience shows me happens, and it happens all the time under every circumstance. And I'm not picking on students
No.
at all. It happens everywhere.
Kind of interesting the day.
Okay, well,
Well, also again, there's currently no bathroom downstairs in this property though, too. And I'm just saying that, yeah. So,
Yeah, I mean, it's up to you, but if you want to authorize a resolution, you have it ready, and then you can look into it further before the next meeting.
I think, what do you think, folks?
I mean, it's allowed by code, I think, as long as we put that special condition in, I think that's.
It's about as far as we can go, I think.
it gives us some degree of enforcement capability. And if it's a rental, it absolutely gives us enforcement capability. So the fear of future is maybe addressed better by that than current. I mean, we're talking about a situation where it's going to be 3 to 4 years, but then after that, that stays.
So do I hear a motion to authorize our attorney to prepare a draft resolution?
So, second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none. Emily, you're all set. You do that for us, and thank you. Emily, you're gonna have to help. Where am I?
We're on letter E on the second page. Oh, I'm sorry, we're on letter F on the third page. Apologies.
The last public hearing.
So this is a motion to open the public. hearing. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you're continuing it.
Into the public hearing. PB 2407 for 147-149 and 151 North Chestnut Street. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Second. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none. The public hearing continues.
Okay, first to point out in your packet, there are two written comments that were received. Just want to call your attention to those. Our first speaker signed up is Kara Lee. You want to join with me?
Speak to you. I live at 135 Huguenot Street, so I feel like I'm being neighbor to this proposal. And I have mostly questions, and I know you're not going to answer the questions today, but it's just questions for me to think about as we go forward. First of all, I think with the addition of this third apartment building, in addition to Zero Place on North Chestnut Street, this represents a pretty quick build out for this area. And I think it's difficult, the way it seems to be scheduled to really evaluate the cumulative impacts of the three buildings. So the first that I'd like to address is the question of traffic. I was at the last meeting where the traffic consultant for this building spoke to issues related to traffic. And as is usually the case, the traffic is being looked at on a project by project basis. So the evaluation is what the impact of this project will be on traffic, as opposed to looking, I believe, at the cumulative impact of these three buildings that are proposed or already permitted. So I guess my question to the board is, can you look at that cumulatively? How would you go about that? And I'd be very interested in what it would reveal, because my observation is that the traffic on North Chestnut Street has really increased dramatically. And I don't think that the addition of any particular one building is what's significant, but that as a community, we need to be looking at what the traffic patterns are. The intersections with other streets along North Chestnut Street have become very challenging. So I think it's important to look at that. The second thing, again, an issue of cumulative impact is sewage management. And I know this has been raised before. I believe that our sewage treatment plant is still under consent order from DEC for performance failures. So my question to the board is, do you feel confident that our existing plant will suffice to meet the cumulative impact of these three additional buildings? It's a very important question. I guess I'm thinking that ideally, if the village can slow down in order to assess the impacts of the buildings that are already permitted before moving ahead with permission for this building, it would be really good to be able to understand the impact of the two that are underway before adding the third, which is the largest of the three. The question of affordable housing is so important in the Falls, and the disproportionate number of studios that are being proposed in this building is puzzling to me. And I'm interested in the understanding of what demographic it's designed to meet. I don't have any problem with students living there, but if it is primarily students because of the design with so many studios, I just think it doesn't really meet the needs of the community that is stressed over and over in terms of affordable housing for families. The next thing is, I don't know whether we call this design or architecture, but the choice of building materials is really important in terms of the overall look of the building and its contribution to community character. I'm hoping that Zero Place won't set the standard for the quality of building materials used in terms of the exterior of the building. So those are really the questions that I have about the project. And I'm sure there are all things that you're thinking about, but I think that lots of people share my concern about these particular questions. So thank you.
I would encourage you to stay in the audience, because when the applicant comes up, we can hopefully answer some of your questions.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, the next person who has signed up is Susan, is it ST Stetson? Okay, thank you. Is it SSON or EN? IN. Thank you.
I would like to echo a lot of the same, issues and questions that Carol had brought up. I have to say that I live off of Mercenden Road. And the amount of traffic that's happened recently in the past year or so. We've had so many accidents on that road because people don't want to go through town or through the beginning of 32. And they're cutting through Horsenden, which those, you know what that road looks like. And it's a nightmare in the winter. I've had the neighbor's house across from me has been hit twice, the house itself, on the thoroughfare. Something like this is going to obviously bring more traffic to Horsenden Road. And I don't know if the county's gonna come through, you know, they've already taken all the trees down. They did that a year or two ago. They took all these trees down around it to try and help it over a little bit. But my biggest issue that I think a lot of people do not realize that this is the fourth apartment building that we're putting up. They keep thinking that this is the third one. And so I know we'd say, well, you're putting it out there for people, but people don't know. They really don't know about this as a fourth building. And driving for me, just driving through town now, with the second building going up, it's changing the whole landscape. I'm the historian for the town. And part of my job, you know, is I look at the history here and the beauty of this town and this village. And putting up all these giant apartment buildings. I used to live in Spring Valley and I watched the beautiful nature there become this giant complex. And I'm trying to not have our village and our town look like them. Just to keep going, building, and just, you know, moving more and more on Route 32. It's scary to me. I've lived here for 50 years and I've seen the changes. I was on the environmental board for several years, and we tried to, you know, look at the issues in terms of the water, what Karen had talked about. I worked at Huguenot Street and dealt with the septic, smelling that septic all the time there. I'm concerned about all these issues, but I think the slowing down is maybe one of the most important things here, is what Karen had said as well about, let's see what happens with 3 big apartment buildings. I'm not even discussing the whole thing about net zero becoming condos, which is another whole issue to think about. But I think just giving us time to look and see what this village and town is going to look like with really big apartment buildings at the bottom of town, it's just something to think about. So.
That's all I have signed up.
Mine. Moving on. Well, we've had this public hearing open now for a while. My recommendation is that we close it and let the applicant address some of the comments of tonight and some of the comments of last week. I know they've written some things. So anyway, do I hear a motion to close the public hearing?
So, I have a question.
Yep.
So we still haven't, we're still waiting for, comments from the environmental board, and the plans were just, the revisions were just submitted yesterday. So I think it still might be a little early to close the public hearing.
They're advisory, so their comments would still be able to be considered by you if they're not a part of the public hearing. So they're an advisory board to the planning board. Certainly the decision is not going to come in the next week or so.
Yeah, I mean. It is pretty fun. Yeah, I would deal. We are. Well, I guess it's not pertinent for me to discuss it now, but. That's one of the reasons I'm hesitant is that we've been hearing from, you know, our various consultants and experts. But I'm not so certain. I mean, just from what you see, you know, it's sort of like you hear from the traffic consultant that everything's gonna be okay, and then there's always these caveats, oh, we're gonna slow this down, or maybe they're gonna slow this down, maybe they're gonna change this light or whatever, but you don't know if they're actually gonna do it. And then, you know, your actual experience in the traffic it's pretty good.
Can I ask, Emily, can I ask you a point of order? Because my understanding is that we have an obligation, and this is something I've been asking multiple times, so. We would like to be able to say, here's the collective things, and we've been asking for that, but that each project has to be evaluated on a project by project basis, and that's our obligation.
Each project is project by project, yes. At the same time, a lot of the evaluations and the studies are cumulative and cover, they need to cover the impacts of all the projects.
To clarify too for the board, the traffic study absolutely considered, I believe it was 7 projects that were either known to be on the books or potentially on the books. And they calculated the numbers that those projects were supposed to generate into their calculations. The applicant can certainly describe it more, but it's very clear in the traffic study that they considered, and in some of those projects either haven't happened, they've come off the books totally, or one is New Paltz Apartments, which is significantly a long period of time away. So just pointing out that it was included. And then the answer about this sewage is both the DPW superintendent and the village engineer have confirmed there's enough capacity for all the projects, correct?
And I guess also to your point, another way of looking at it is that it's the village board that sets the zoning and says that this area, which this is the furthest north part of the NBR district, it wouldn't keep going further north, but the village board sets the zoning and says in this area, this is what we want. If the village board thinks that it needs to be changed, they can change it. But this board's job is to evaluate each project in the context of that zoning and not to question the plan that is set out by the zoning.
Well, if I may, there's a motion on the table to close the public hearing. I'll second it. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, public hearing is closed. Now does the applicant come up? Is that what we're doing?
Yeah, the next is for discussion.
Okay.
Rachel, I apologize. Did you vote on that closing? I didn't know if you did or didn't.
Yeah.
Okay.
We are.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Sorry,
Yeah. All right.
given how long the public hearing went last meeting, I tried to shake it up a little bit to make it move faster for other people.
Thank you. Happy anniversary, we didn't forget our 1-year anniversary of presenting before you, and it's also tax day, so. The record sale of Palmer, Cutting Banner, joined by our engineer, Dave Burke, our architect, and I'll say right this time, Startip, our traffic consultant from Lavelle, was creating it. We all for you, we did just hear some of the public comments tonight. I think Mr. Spade did a pretty good job of addressing some of those comments, but I think more to what we want to present tonight is a detail of what we did in our most recent response to comment submissions. So with that, as the board knows, we were most recently before you on April 1st. So we're back with our supplemental submission. Since that time, we were also last week with the Zoning Board of Appeals, where they granted the variance for the setback, or actually setback further than the zoning requires, it's actually a minimum and a maximum threshold. That variance was reduced, well, it's because we created the shared projects that removed, some of that aid. With that, at the last meeting, the board recommended that we, Mr. Bain recommended that we reach out to the Waltonville Valley Land Trust, which we've done to discuss our potential rail trail connection. They're also in touch with the Village's Affordable Housing Board, which we understand is meeting late next week to discuss the project in general. And of course, the project will comply with the village's new law. The other projects in the corridor were subject to a 10% affordable housing component. We now are the new law, so we're 15%. For our project, that's 20 total units. Finally, we are in the process of scheduling a return to Village's Design Review Board and Historic Preservation Commission to discuss the updates to our project, which again reflect the DRB's comments as well as the evolution of the project as we've been meeting with you. Some other just general updates this is all included in our April submission, but just to sort of highlight those narrow points. And Stark can certainly speak to this. One of the questions or discussions we had was regarding the parking. So I'm going to put the plans and the documents and the traffic reports all align on this narrative. So I'm going to say it slowly because that way we have we're all on that page. Our documents now reflected. We know that was a conversation with you all last month. So for the 128 units in our mixed use building, the code requires 146 spaces. And that's pursuant to section 212, 13G, 13D2. 134 on-site parking spaces, including 8 accessible parking spaces, will be provided, along with 12 on-street parking spaces, which are permitted under section 212, 13G, 13C. So that's 146 parking spaces, which satisfies that zoning requirement. We then have another 12 land bank spaces that need to be provided, which can be improved in the future if needed. So when you include the 12 land bank spaces, the proposal has 158 total spaces. We did include a letter from Bella that addresses parking details and more detail. The evolution of the project had changed slightly, just those numbers as from their report. With that report and letter from Labella reflects 158 parking spaces. Again, 134 on street, 134 on site, 12 on street, and 12 landing spaces. So that's up from 11.
Could you, or maybe Mike has looked at it more closely, but when I tried to read it earlier, I couldn't quite make sense of it. So it might help for the board. Could you go through that calculation because where?
Yeah, and to clarify, that's using the density bonus for the shared spaces.
And the density bonus is at the discretion of the board. So I just want to make sure that's clear what's at the board.
Yeah, I'll stop saying, let's probably focus on that because the others we can get into as we make the form, but we have the landscaping plan updates. We'll also touch on, because that was a question that Rachel had at the prior meeting, and then we talked about our lighting for the roof plan. There's a rain sensor that's been added to our pumping system during heavy rains. And we also proposed an elevation to include some conceptual signage. So let's focus on that, if we may, that specific question about the parking. I don't know, sorry, do you want to bring up the site plan? Or if we had David here, we can also bring up the plan, but maybe it's best for you to walk us through it, Stark.
Yeah, give me a moment. I can pull up the site plan. I just have to pull it up.
Stark, I apologize. We have the volume here on the owl up all the way. If you can speak a little louder.
Can you hear me better now?
A little bit. It's a fault of our equipment. It's no fault of yours, but it's a very quiet system. But
Okay.
there's no way to raise the volume anymore.
All right, I'll do my best to yell in. Well, no, yeah. Let's see. Site plan.
Oh, yep. Thank you.
See the best way to do this.
Well, 5 minutes time.
I don't have a share screen option to show the site plan, y'all.
David's gonna share.
Dave can share.
Okay, sorry about that. Oh, shoot. Yes, I do. I'm sorry, David.
Yeah, to clarify for the board, it's 175 spaces is what is required under the strict reading of the code. But with the bonus, it lowers it.
Yeah, so the table that David has pulled up from the site plan shows the calculation of the parking requirements per the code, and then per the reduction at the board's discretion that's allowed in the code. And that's how we arrive at the 146. The as
Has the board granted that discretion at this point?
So our traffic report looked at and worked with your traffic consultant to evaluate the need, and that's how we arrived at. And Stark, maybe you should speak to that too, because that's
Yeah.
discussion.
Yeah, I'm getting there about, so I think this is all per the village's code. And then what's also included and was reviewed by the village's traffic consultant, what's included in our traffic study is what's called a shared parking analysis, which looks at actual demand based on the mixed use development, based on time of day. So the temporal fluctuations of demand based on the various uses, in this case, residential and retail. And what we found through that shared parking analysis is that the actual peak parking demand expected for the site on a weekday, really at the highest peak demand, is 131 spaces. And just, as a little point of information, is that occurs in the overnight period, which makes sense because the residential makes up the larger portion of this project, and residential demand peaks at nighttime when everybody is at home. On the weekends, the calculated peak demand was, forgive me, make sure.
I mean, I know you have like databases and everything here, but basically you just said peak demand was 130 something, which, and there's 128 units, which means the peak demand at night is basically one car per unit. It's hard to wrap my head around. Just given what I know about most families and couples, in a 1-bedroom or 2-bedroom or studio, it seems like at a minimum you'd have one car per unit.
Well, at one car per unit, that does meet that demand that we're estimating using industry standards, using the ITE's parking generation manual. These are answers that we arrived at using data-backed information, and were reviewed by the village's traffic consultant. I understand that there might be this thought that there could be more demand than is being provided, but even then, at 131 spaces, we still have an additional 12 spaces that could be utilized. And I think what's also important is that the project does consider these land bank spaces that can be realized if it's deemed necessary in time.
I get that it's data. I mean, it doesn't seem
Stark, why don't you
that
speak?
plausible that you have 128 units and only 3 of those units are 2-car units. We're living where it is that you don't have a minimum of 1 car per unit, and it leaves a tremendous number of units where there's no space for a second car. That's what I totally understand that you're using data and reference manuals and standards. I'm not questioning that you got this data. What I'm trying to wrap my head around is that just doesn't seem plausible.
Star, can you speak to a normal day, like the regular, when the commercial operations are on? I think it's important to kind of understand that the peak is, right, the work, I always.
Well, we said 131 and it was overnight, which is why, but we're at when I would expect most people to be home.
Because of the kind of commercial components, when folks typically are at work, there is that interplay. So I guess what I'm asking Star to help sort of go through is what the normal course of business as far as parking is concerned on site, because we also have some on-street parking spaces in addition to some land. Yeah.
But that 131, that peak thing, doesn't even need to reach the on-site retail spots.
Right, and the on-street spaces are counted in your numbers, just to clarify. So.
I'm not,
The-
my issue is not at all with the retail. My issue is with, and I think that complicates it. My issue is with the number of units and the plausibility that the vast majority of that number of units would only have one car for them. And because they're, with 128 units and 146 parking spots, that doesn't give you a tremendous number of people who can have 2 cars per unit.
Right, and the same way that we're breaking up the parking, the unit distribution of the building is also similarly directed at the studio and 1 bedrooms. We have 23 studios, we have 72 1 bedrooms, and then we only have 33 2 bedrooms. So the distribution or the unit mix, we're heavy on 1 bedroom, 1 studio.
Saying, but I also think a lot of people will, it's not, a 1 bedroom is not necessarily 1 person. 72 units, 1 bedroom, if my husband and I lived in an apartment, we'd each have a car and it would be 1 bedroom. Like.
No, I in apartments with my wife, we had 1 car, we shared it, we were able to manage it, that's how we functioned it, and then we bought a house, out of city, and we have 2 cars. I mean, I get it, I understand that, the data is provided because that's what industry standards typically reflect, but I think the land.
I'm not going to argue, what I'm here to say is I'm having a hard time accepting that data. And I don't think it's an unreasonable thing to get my head around. I will get my head around it. I'm not here to waste time, but that's my issue.
We have experts though, excuse me.
Yes.
So I've heard mention that our expert was involved in this, but I don't see any letter here from our expert, so.
Our expert reviewed the traffic study, which is where this is presented, and came back and said it was acceptable. So,
Have something in writing?
yeah, we did. We absolutely did, several months ago.
That was based on a different.
No, they're referencing the same traffic study. They haven't changed the number of spaces. So the traffic study, no, that's incorrect. The traffic study was done based on 128 units. So, yeah.
The plans had to be, all of them had to be matched together.
Yeah.
The numbers
Yeah.
we
We've just been sort of circling around all the other things for a period of time, but the traffic study was done based on the 128 units. Yeah, it was, yeah.
That's the board's preference. We can build those day 1 and then they'll be available. But the same would be true. If there is a shown to be a need as the project comes online, that immediately becomes it's an obligation. But we don't install anything in that landmark area. It's either a landscape green space, right? That's just serving a traditional green space. And then it would have to be built if there was a demand.
If the board doesn't mind, the last 2 days, I've done a pretty deep dive study, and I have a couple questions on the study that I didn't jump out at me previously, if you don't mind. So.
Explain a little bit, you did a study. What did you study?
So what I studied primarily was, and I have a printout here of the pages in the traffic study about how they calculated the parking spaces. Their stuff. Yeah. No, that's the site plan. This was the hour by hour study, which is a part of this traffic study that admittedly our consultants reviewed and said they had no issues with. But I've identified some questions that don't seem correct based on new information we've gotten. So that's really what I want to ask. Because we heard that one of the potential retail uses might be a bakery or a restaurant. And I note that on the weekends, from 6 to 7, 7 to 8, it's and from 8 to 9, it's portrayed as 0 cars for retail. I would think that if we have a bakery on a Saturday or Sunday morning, it's going to open before 9 o'clock. And there's probably going to be some employees there earlier to get ready. So I would sort of propose that those 0 numbers are not accurate. Given now, maybe when the traffic study was set up, you didn't know what uses, but a bakery and a restaurant, I'm sure, may or may not have breakfast. There's a lot of unknowns. What I might suggest to the board and to the applicant is, rather than increasing the pervious pavement, try to find the ability to increase, and I don't know what the number would be, the increase of land bank spaces that protects the project in the future and the village in the future of having set-asides for new spaces if they're needed, but doesn't mean you have to build them until the way the land bank spaces work, if the building inspector starts noticing or receiving complaints, he can then say, I believe these land bank spaces now have to be constructed. So rather than creating spaces just because we're concerned that these numbers may or may not be valid, to me, it makes more sense to potentially create more land bank spaces that gives us a little cushion. And if they never get used, it saves green space. So it's just a thought.
If it were at all possible, car ownership. If you rent an apartment and that apartment only comes with 1 space, that's all you get.
Well, then anybody else though has to find somewhere else to park and they're going to try to park on the streets. It's still going to create a parking problem for the village. My belief. Yeah. I'm guessing the 128 number is the assumption that with 128 units, you may very logically have some units that are seniors, people who don't choose not to have a vehicle. It is becoming more prevalent. I know it's not the norm. I know in most households, we have at least 1 or 2 vehicles. But there is, with public transportation, with bicycle ability, you may get some people who have no vehicles. The residential calculations hour to hour don't bother me near as much as based on the projected uses that we've heard for the retail. I think the early morning and the later evening may be incorrect. I think it's somebody outside. Yeah. No, it's somebody outside talking.
Well, let me offer this. I completely agree with Nikki. Here's a back of the napkin calculation, fully disclosing this. With 128 apartment units, even if 30% of those units have 2 cars, I think you need 164 parking spaces every night for people to put their cars there. Is it reasonable to assume that 30% of all the people have 2 cars? I think it's reasonable. That said, I would strongly recommend that you build the 12 land bank spaces right now. Get it done, get it out of the way. You got a ton of equipment there to build. I'm not concerned about adding impervious surface to this project because you have a stormwater pollution prevention plan that, in my opinion, is second to none. Whatever additional runoff is generated by this thing, I'm sure your system can handle. So what's the possibility of finding a few more land bank spaces? Build 12, land bank a few more. I completely disagree that you have enough parking.
Could I offer another analysis of these numbers? So I'm just looking at the numbers for the residential, the studio, 1 bedroom or 2 bedroom. And if you add that up, you get to 158. So that's close to what you just guessed.
Right.
What you just estimated, Terry, right?
Say again?
So I'm looking at the parking summary table. If you add up the residential, not the retail.
The residential parking spots.
Parking spots.
Okay.
You get to 158 spots. That's kind of what you were saying, you're adding a third, right? And then the retail asks for 17.4 spots, 18 spots. And so then your total is 175. So it seems to me that it's not really reasonable that to take an entire 20% discount off of that and get to a number that's below what the retail would or what the
Yeah.
residential would require.
Yeah.
Like the residential requires 150.
Yeah, and the proportion of the retail to the total residential, and just to point out too, and it just jumped out at me today, looking at the plan for 145, they did not take any, they took 0 credit. They created exactly the number of, actually 2 more spaces than they needed without the 20%. Just for comparison, the 145 North Chestnut project. I was not involved in that, so I didn't realize that, but I was looking at their plan today and realized that they didn't take any. My concern would be is that the code allows it, but I think it, as Emily said, it's the board's purview whether they want to grant that, maybe 1 point. I'm speaking a little without having done any calculations, but maybe 1.1 might be a little more valid, 1.12.
Just look at the overnight being a limiting factor, then the
Yeah.
residential requires 158 spots, which I think is what you have, right, with your land bank spaces. So that number, sort of makes sense. That's our code.
Yeah.
So we need 158 for the residential. If the retail is gonna happen during the day, it's not,
Yeah.
I'm just a different way for the board to look at it.
And maybe Terry, you're onto something where you say, build those 12 land bank spaces now and find have the board come up with a number that they're comfortable with, whether it be 6 or 8 more spaces.
Mobilize a contract with 12 parking spaces across this company.
Simple units. The way that it looks now, the reason that you have such an extensive water management system is because you're building on a wetland. So it's not out of, the goodness of your concern for the environment, it's because there's a serious environmental issue there. And I think that, in terms of the parking, yeah, you could reduce the number of units. And you could use more pervious as opposed to impervious surfaces for the spaces. But just to, add, this thing already is gigantic and it already has a huge parking lot. To add more spaces to that, I think would detract from the not just the aesthetics, but also the environmental viability.
I think importantly, we proposed to do those spaces. We sort of walked back into land banking because the actual traffic study itself showed that we didn't need that many spaces. So that the shared parking analysis reflected the lower number. The board is expressing its concern with respect to what difference of opinion than what our consultant and what the consultant said. So we're amenable to those changes, but we have proposed to include them. So we were proposing to meet that number, but because we were trying, we mentioned Rachel trying to incorporate other options related to our study, that's what led us to propose that land bank, because again, it's discretion. We'll look at it, we'll look at additional spaces to see if there is additional room for more land banking, and obviously can put that to you. Something that, again, we're not asking the board to take any action tonight. We're here really to present a lot of these updates, and we still have, again, just by closing the hearing, we're by no means done with this. We need to go back to the DRB. We need to be, we're still working with the rail trail. So we have a lot of pieces that are coming together for this application. So I think we can address that. We do also.
So just the quick math here, if it was 1.1, the bonus that was awarded instead of 1.2, it comes out to 158.3 spaces. So, which is roughly what they're proposing. They're proposing 158. So there's by adding those 12 spaces, they're taking a 10% instead of a 20%. But I just wanted to put it in number perspective for you.
However, I still think they should have some more land bank spaces
I would agree.
because I don't think there's enough.
Rachel, I'm sorry, how do you pronounce your last name? Lugaka. Lugaka. We have also put together our, I don't know if you had a chance to look at it, but we did put our formal landscaping plan in there, so it does list out all the plantings.
Okay.
Okay, okay. So we haven't,
This good.
so we've incorporated that, which again also goes to the conversation about stormwater and sort of pollinators and all that. Other information that's included. One other comment that came from the board last month was the site lighting. So the lighting in the roof will be downward facing, dark sky compliant. So the intent to be lighting to be bat friendly, and I'll speak to Mike about the color. I'm not going to say the color. I'm going to make sure he says the right thing. The lighting plan is provided for that. So we'll generally give them 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. so that you wouldn't have lights otherwise. But Mike, do you want?
Yeah, so bat friendly with lighting, we don't want any temperature higher than 27 Kelvin. So that's what we're proposing, nothing higher than 2700 Kelvin. We're actually looking for other fixtures that might give us something a little less than that, but generally the commercial lights don't go below 2700 Kelvin. If you're dealing with turtles at the ground surface, there's certain lights that you would propose, you know, if you had migrating turtles going through the site or something like that, where you would propose a lower color than 27 Kelvin because turtles, they don't want to be mistaken from the light being moonlight.
Yeah.
So in this case, 27.
And I reviewed the foot candles and they're all, I think the highest I saw anywhere was 9 point something. They're all less than 10, which is very acceptable. So.
And then Mike, you want to speak to the rain sensor? Question how that works.
Yeah, I mean, we're still working on actual models and how it works with the control of the rain sensor was essentially if it detects a certain amount of rain, and that could be established with the sewer department on what that amount is based on their own conditions. It would override if a float were to say, hey, start pumping now. And you can override it for a certain amount of time. You can override it until the rain intensity decreases. There's a lot of different ways you can do this. So we're working on those details and we'll work on with Blue.
Thank you for that.
And David, would you please speak to the updates to the sign, just to show the signage concept? Naturally, that'll evolve with the tenants, but this is to create sort of a form base, I guess, for.
Yeah, just pulling up that sheet. So we put on our drawing, all signage to comply with the 212.25 gateway business MBR and similar districts. We just share this. And because we don't have any tenants, renting at this point, we have not found the tenants. We have just done some mock signage, that suggests, where they might be located. And they comply with the size as well. So until we have tenants on board.
And I guess we'd ask the board just for point of information, are there specifics that you're looking for in this phase of typically signed permitting will be handled post approval, but is there anything explicitly that we can?
If there's a color scheme.
Yes.
Yeah, they have to comply with the sign law, but if there's a color scheme that you could provide, the board could certainly weigh in on their choices of colors in comparison to the structure. That might be something that the board, could be a condition. This family of colors or this type of, the sign law is the sign law, but.
Besides where on the building and the freestanding signs,
So I think sometimes we include like wayfinding signage too, through parking areas or otherwise, so we can. I don't imagine why that would be, any reason why we wouldn't show that.
If you could show that now, that would be good. Yeah, that's not client related, so. One other thing, the design review board had sent a letter requesting a new meeting. Because they met with this group back, as Mr. Palmer said, back in October, I believe. So I put the two of them in contact with each other. Did you get a reply back? Or we're trying to get them on this month's agenda for the design review board, but if they're not on this month's, they'll be on next month's.
Is it the purview of the design review board to take a look at the color of the signs and things when they do that?
Their general feeling, and I don't know that I necessarily agree with their opinion, but they say that they do not have review power over signs. I reading the code, I think they do, but yeah. But they do want to speak to the renderings of the buildings, which were not available back in October. Yeah. Yeah.
Clark, did you weigh in? Clark did reach out. Where are we with DOT and the speed limits and
Sorry, Taylor, you were asking about a DOT update?
yes, thank you.
Yeah, okay. Sorry. So, yes, we actually had a meeting with the DOT earlier this week. They are still working through the process, reviewing the village's submission of the speed reduction along North Chestnut. Yeah, they move like molasses in wintertime, I'll tell you. But that's the best we have at this point with the speed limit reduction.
I will add that they're moving quicker, believe it or not, than they normally do. And I think that's because they've gotten a fair amount of pressure from a number of people and organizations to do this, because normally they say, put it on the municipality to do the pay for the studies, and then they'll review it. So they are reviewing it, but we're at their mercy.
We've been speaking with the Affordable Housing Board, but we don't go to the specific committee meetings.
I can speak to that. I've had 2 conversations with the developer about affordable housing. They've been at the broad level of what our ordinance says and how we implement the ordinance. We began to talk about unit mix a little bit, and I asked the developer to just hold off until the Affordable Housing Board meets on April 22nd. That meeting is scheduled. We do have a quorum as far as I know. So at the next planning board meeting or whatever, we'll have a recommendation from the Affordable Housing Board about a unit mix.
Okay, great, thank you.
And I have to say, the developer has been very forthcoming and their desire to meet the requirements of the affordable housing goals of the city, of the village. And for that, I appreciate it.
No, I know there was one or a number of speakers have asked about the possibility of 3-bedroom units, and I know you guys said you were going to explore it. Is there any further exploration, or is it still to be determined?
I think that's not determined. I think it's not going to be able to redesign
Okay.
programming. It doesn't work. So it's not.
Okay.
Going in, I think next door they did include.
Next door in 145, there are 7, I believe. Yeah, and they have very few studios, so I will say that.
Anything else from the board? Anything else from the applicant? Thank you very much.
Do you anticipate you'll have information for next meeting, or do we want to wait 2 meetings?
I guess maybe
You can tell me.
DRB can fit us in then.
Okay. You and I can talk further next week.
Yeah. Affordable Housing Board meets on second, so.
Yeah.
so we don't meet until the first meeting.
Right, we have 3 weeks from tonight is our next meeting, so we have time. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
So that's.
Okay, here. We'll wait.
Item G.
And if they ever put that in the letter.
This is a new application. PB 25-08, 27-29 Main Street. Is for the developer here to fill us in. Or the owner or the owner's representative or whoever.
So. Well, to the last, we did not have a tenant for the basement area. The wall started. Yeah, I didn't have an application. I would say, I don't know what they did down there, but I never saw any evidence of it, and I showed that building to the village, the town, everybody was down. So, Woods, we must have 15 people down. So.
Let's focus on it. And the reason I'm doing this, ladies and gentlemen, is because I wasn't here. I have no idea what you're talking about. Nor do half the people in the audience. So let's move.
Okay, so this is the Wells Fargo building. We. Site plan for the Hunting Valley Credit Union, Anytime Fitness. Anytime Fitness took possession and the credit union taking possession, so they're starting to do their interior work. We did not have a tenant for the basement. We built about 1,200 square feet finished there.
That's not, you're calling that finished.
Well, it was finished. I took the ceiling, I gutted it, because in order for me to get credit unions communications and power to here, we had to run across the basement. In order to get the gyms, electrical needs, and plumbing needs, I had to open the ceiling to get down into the basement. So this space is currently about 1,200 square feet, and it's raw.
Well, that's, I think that better describes it. I mean, I went down there today, but I was walking by while, John was outside and he let me in to look at it. And it's definitely a basement. There's no windows. And it's concrete. I mean, you know what, I always think of a finished basement as having paneling and a carpet or something.
Well, it did have, I removed it.
You removed it all.
Yeah.
So.
And it would need a building permit before occupancy to clarify, so.
So what is really, I've been focused on this, the gentleman, the broker brought me a martial arts guy, he now, as of today, got a little wobbly on me, he's not sure he's gonna go forward. But I have an office user and several other people that are permitted uses. So my question to you is, can we agree that if it's a permitted use in the B2 zone, or I'm in the gateway, but B2 zone allows for the same uses as the gateway.
Is that true?
Well, so what was proposed is a martial arts studio, which under our code by direct definition is an instructional use. If you read the definition of instructional use, martial arts studio is listed in the definition. That requires a special use. Offices and other things, I'd have to go back and look at the code. Some might be special use, some might be just site plan. Either way, it would need site plan review. The question would be if it's a use that requires special use. Now, Emily could weigh in on if, any use that requires site plan could be generically approved. That's up to the board and Emily to decide, and the code enforcement officer to decide.
In other words, could we approve a site plan that has a variety of different?
Correct. Now, I will say though, we reviewed the parking based on the presentation of the martial arts studio. And we meaning the code enforcement office, based on the information given from the applicant that it would be 6 to 8 people, we determined that it needed 6 additional spaces of parking. Right now, it has 5 over the required amount. But it would need 1 more if the board agrees with our 6. If the use changes, the amount of parking could very well change. Yep.
Summer, fall.
Yeah.
You know, so we approved, the only things approved for the site plan are the credit union and the gym.
And the parking and the landscaping and everything associated with that plan. Yes,
And so the site plan needs to be amended
correct,
to permit anything
correct,
go into the basement space.
correct.
And there are some uses that are pre-approved uses in this zone that wouldn't require a special use
Correct.
permit. But if the use requires a special use, we have to do that.
Correct. Now, and we also need to consider the parking that would be associated with that use. Different types of uses have different type of parking requirements. And to further this, one suggestion that came out of this, and Mr. Joseph can confirm or not confirm if this is true. I've been told by residents that the Wells Fargo ATM is no longer being used. Just a consideration, if you are reviewing the site plan, potentially that area of those 3 drive-through lanes, if the current bank is at the other end, it's at the end of the gym. I'm not sure how a drive-through benefits a gym. So potentially that 3-lane structure could be removed and create more parking there. Yeah. Okay.
What do you propose to put in?
Well, any use of permitted for the
Without a special use.
without a special use. Now,
Does
so
that, stop. Does that in and of itself create parking? I mean, with that statement, do we know he needs 6 spaces, 10 spaces, 2 spaces?
I mean,
To be determined.
So you don't know.
Well, hang on.
Okay.
So first of all, it needs site plan approval because it's a use in a different part of the building. So,
Yeah.
setting, I know you're asking about parking.
No, I'm not. No, I'm not.
It needs site.
I'm trying to find out what he proposes to put there. And he's giving me a vague idea. He hasn't told me what it is.
Right. So I was just gonna say that for.
Kind of like, why are we here?
Well, we got an application for a martial arts studio.
and until this morning, we had a martial arts.
Okay.
So let's just talk about the drive-through, so the drive.
No, don't jump ahead. Don't jump ahead. I'm not gonna be able to help until you tell me what you want to put in the bill.
I'm gonna rent it to an office, and I'll rent it to my office officer. I don't particularly think that it's the right person, I'll get the martial guidance guy down there, because I think that from a synergy of the gym and those type of things, it would be better. It would draw more people daily to the property. But if the office guy is all I have, that's what I'm gonna do.
Do you have?
But that's not what you're telling me. You're saying maybe it'll be on.
I'll rent it to the office. There you go.
And that's, we put in the minutes, it's gonna be.
Well, we could amend the application. I could have the code enforcement officer re-review it for parking.
Yeah.
We, based on an office, we may not need 6 spaces. We may only need the 5 addition that are already there.
If the office has 12 employees,
Well, and that's what I said. We'll have to look at it. I don't know. We'll have to look at it. Yeah.
I mean, there's no windows. I can't imagine putting somebody down there.
It's not my idea.
I understand.
Yeah.
But also, doesn't
well,
he
yeah,
don't you have to get, like, if that part of the building, doesn't it have to be like, he has to get a certificate of occupancy or
Correct.
something like that?
Correct. Means he has to conform with building, but that doesn't mean he has to have a window. You can have spaces without windows. Bedrooms have to have windows. Office spaces, as long as they have legal access. And that's up to the building inspector to determine if it has legal access.
But this board can only review an application that it has, so
Right.
we don't have an application for an
Right.
office.
Yeah, I'm.
Well, he can amend it to an office and we can re-review it and go from there. Yeah, right. I guess, so you're inclined to go toward office rather than any use, because we could come up with a list of uses that it could be and present that, but and that's up to this board whether you want to review that or not.
Okay, well, what we've done in these projects on North Chestnut Street is we've approved it with a list of potential uses. We've said this space can be used. These are the potential uses.
Mhm.
And when you come with one of those uses, you have to calculate the parking and the building inspector will make sure it fits. And then you go ahead. So
So-
we could do that if we had a list of potential uses.
Right.
And so in that case, it's not right to declare the lease right now, but if it's the case that you have kind of the menu a la carte thing,
Mhm.
then the site plan gets reviewed and approved based on that menu.
Yep.
Mhm.
And the applicant then, say you have a year lease for an office and next year your karate studio comes back,
Then you have to come back here.
then you, oh, okay, so
No,
you can't do special use permit in that menu?
No.
Yeah, you can.
Oh,
I mean, we have.
if this board approves certain types, right.
From the menu, it doesn't have to come back to us each
Right.
time the tenant changes.
As long as it meets the definition of all the generic uses that this board has approved for that space.
That seems like the most.
But I think it would be better if it comes from you rather than we tell you what you can do. If you tell us a range of what you want to do, then we can go from there.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think our job is to react to an application.
Correct.
My understanding, as I sit here now, I don't have.
Well, we had one for.
We had one until this morning.
He wants to withdraw. So as I sit here now, I don't have.
We could amend it, and I can come back.
Okay, thank
I'll
you.
amend it for what is.
A range of
in the
uses.
zone that doesn't require a special use.
Thank you.
And I would just like that part, like not to be just, but to have categories or something. However it's listed out, so we can wrap our head around it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can go back with anything you want.
Yeah, whatever's in the, whatever, like the zone has categories that are specifically permitted, and there's a standard of what you have to have. And as long as I stay within that box, we should be good.
And even if some of them, if you wanted to add special uses, you could, this board would just be reviewing it as a special use. So, yeah.
Thank you very much. Looks like we're into a pre-application.
Yes, so unique
Goals for a pre-app.
So very unique situation. We have an applicant that before they do spend a lot of time coming up with a design and a plan, wanted to get feedback from this board. I encourage them to do this because then they're maybe not going in direction that this board doesn't think is right. So they are here before an application, which is why you don't have anything in your folder except this picture that they sent, and he has a much bigger copy of it here with him. So with that, I'll let you introduce yourself and say, talk about the potential project.
I got a couple of, they're just concept plans, they're nothing detailed, just something to look at for reference purposes. John Nosek Engineering, let me introduce myself. And with me is Penny Cindy Porter, they're the owners of the property.
Yeah, join us on the table if you want.
So what we're looking to do, just very quickly is, so this box here, you'll see this is.
Sir, could I ask you a favor, sir? Would you do me, sir? can I stop you for one sec? Can you do it from the other end table? Because then the camera can see what you're, because right now all you're doing is blocking the camera. No, right there.
Brewery here. This is Main Street. So this would be, there's a street that comes here and residences over here.
And to clarify, the property's on both sides of the street.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wait, so it's on the river?
It's on the river side as well as where the existing brewery is. It's all one property. Yep, it's all one property. It's divided by the road.
Yeah, I can tell you that this property is like.
Right.
So-
That's why I wouldn't have thought there was such property.
Yeah.
So, anyway, what they would like to do, is to do possibly a commercial subdivision and to create, a mixed-use building on this end of the property. This is all existing parking through here. Don't know if you've been down that way, but, there is a little out, like kind of like a patio area here. I didn't get detailed with the surveying, because I didn't know where this application was gonna go, so.
Where is the roadway that comes
The-
from
the-
La Stasi?
right here.
No, that's Huguenot Street.
Yes, you're gonna, correct.
But then La Stasi and then it comes to Huguenot Street. Where does it come to Huguenot Street? Over here or here?
So when I went out and did a site visit, and so basically, this is the brewery.
Yeah.
This is all parking. Literally, it goes all the way kind of.
Okay, so it's on the
So-
far end here then.
So it must be off the property this way, because this is parking like pretty much all the way through.
So the building's gonna be by the rail trail?
So the building is proposed to be in the back, so it would be the easterly, northeasterly corner.
Correct.
Or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, it would be that, the other restaurant in between the rail trail and this property.
And so what they're looking to do is, to do like a mixed use building, and they would like to do, possibly a laundromat on the first floor. And, maybe some, apartments on the second and third floor. So that's basically, we would do additional parking. This is conceptual, it would have access on Huguenot Street. In terms of what's there now, the vast majority of the parking is never really used. So it's an opportunity for them to possibly improve on what's there now. By putting in kind of like a mixed use building. So that's why we're here. We are in the gateway zone. So the zoning itself seems to be pretty lenient with regards to setbacks and so forth and acreages. And so we don't think there's any problem meeting that. There is public water and sewer on site. There's actually a hydrant and a sewer manhole right in this area here. So, we have easy access to public water and sewer facilities. And we think it potentially could be a good project. So,
Is this permitted under the zoning?
I'm looking, the apartments definitely are. I'm looking up the laundromat right now.
Yeah, did Alex get a chance to look at this from?
Alex looked at it, but there was no proposed use. It was just a commercial building, so we didn't review it anywhere beyond.
In terms of like the size of the lot?
We didn't get into all that, being that it was a pre-application meeting, so.
Well, I looked through the zoning and the uses, I thought it said mixed use with commercial. I don't know if it specifically said laundromat, but.
Yeah, I'll have to double check that one, but.
Is there like a site plan for the site right now? And it was done recently. I think.
Yeah, I'm sure the Gilded Otter got planning board approval. I did not pull that, but I'm sure.
Right.
Yeah, but it's probably, Emily, is probably not accessible online because it was a while ago. Yeah.
Right now, the parking goes, most of the way up the site, like.
Correct.
including the area you're proposing.
To clarify, the existing building, when you and I spoke on the phone, you're gonna remove the restaurant, correct? And just do,
Restaurant would stay.
oh, the restaurant would stay. Okay.
Stay. You know, the vast majority of this parking is never really used, so we think we can take some of the parking and use, so that it would actually be subdivided into two. This would be a commercial lot, this would be a commercial lot.
We'd have to look at how much parking is allowed, but there are required, but there is a lot of parking on that property.
I'm just thinking of what we would need to look at.
Yeah.
We need to look at both sites, obviously.
Yes, and we would have to take a look at the zoning code and to see what the number of parking spaces would be required for each use. I think what we're looking at today is to find out if, you know, if this is a use that's, number one, what the village will look favorably on, and number two, if it's a permitted use in the gateway zone. So.
Well, the permitted use part is really the building department that has to decide, so what the planning board can give you is feedback on their thoughts on the, you know, the layout and whether this makes sense as a project. One thing I know that the
Laundry is not a permitted use in the Gateway District. So. Yep. Laundry, dry cleaner, or laundry or dry cleaning plant. Neither one is a permitted use.
Because remember that the gateway, the table isn't really right for the gateway.
Yeah, I'd have to go back and look in the code. So, yeah.
One thing that the planning board chairman said when I spoke with him earlier was he wondered if you had thought about putting the building on the suite side and the parking on the interior instead of the other way around. I mean, I know.
Putting the building up closer to the.
Yeah, and the parking behind, because we do encourage parking.
I mean, we could certainly look into that. I guess.
Yeah, that would be more preferable. From my perspective, it's hard to say yes, no, maybe so without knowing actually what the permitted uses are.
Right.
And like, I don't know if we can do a third, 3-4 building.
Oh, yeah, I think we're clear that the residential part is
The
okay
residential part is okay.
and the 3 stories is okay, right?
I believe I'm double checking that as well.
And I actually came and talked to the mayor, good 8 months ago now. And, he's the one who told me about the, apartments in the mixed use, it has to be that. And he also said that we have to have, low income. 10%, I believe it was 10% low income, so we're aware.
It would depend on how many uses.
Yeah.
Actually, it's raised to 15% now. So.
But let me offer this on residential. The more residential development we have in the village, the better. So I completely support you trying to put some apartments in here. If it is more than 20 units, you'd have to set aside 15% for affordable.
Kind
If it's
of,
up- Pardon?
I'm sorry, I was gonna finish my thought on that whole thing with the mayor, but this way it kind of goes into what you're
Yeah,
thinking.
maybe I can help you out.
Yeah, so,
And if
so,
it's more than 10 units, then it's 10% set aside for affordable. Now, I would not want a residential building on the street if I could avoid it. I'd rather have a buffer between the residents and the street. So I like this configuration because I just think it's better for the people who live in the building. The mixed use way it is, I guess, I don't know. I mean.
35 feet and 3 stories is what's allowed.
So, I mean, I do know that we're having a difficult time in other places in the village filling up the commercial spaces for mixed use buildings. But if it's required, it's required. What can I say?
oh, that was my next question real quick, is that, so I was coming up with a design, because a lot of the towns, we live actually in Warwick, and, a lot of the designs show, if it's more to the back, I don't think it matters as much, but they show that it's 3 stories, but then they let it, and then it goes to 4 stories, that could get more apartments in it, but that is something.
Yeah, you can't go higher than 3 without a variance. You could get a variance.
How, and I talked to the mayor about it, how, what are we looking at, like a variance time, like How long does that take?
That's,
Are you going to be dead set against it there?
That's more questions for our professionals. We can't really help with
Yeah.
that.
How many departments are you talking about?
How many departments would we be looking at?
It'd be less than 20.
With it, what it is now. See, so that's why you go up that third story, but if you make it, Usher, when you drive around some of these towns, I did notice my aunt lives down the road by the is the gym, it's right by there, and I noticed it's a big square block, you know, it's like a big square building. Whereas when you go down to Warwick, they made it look very villagey and cute, you know, with the roof lines, and then they stacked it on lines so that you wouldn't say, oh, that's 4 stories. You're like.
if you needed a variance, you'd go to the zoning board for that, and you could do similar to what you're doing with this board, is do a pre-application meeting with them as well.
And how
to
you
get
feel,
feedback.
how long does that take? Would you think? I don't know, how long is-
They only meet once a month to start with, so you're looking at a minimum of 3 months to get through the process, and that's if everything goes perfectly smooth.
Can I make a suggestion? I wonder if it would make more sense to sit down with you, Mike, and or Alex. And
Yeah.
go through what the code allows, because I don't think we require mixed use. We don't require a first.
I'm trying to find I'm sorry, I'm looking on my phone here to try to find the code, but
So then it would be all residential.
If that's-
potentially,
I mean, that would be better.
That's
We
what
wanted that.
Would like to do.
Well, we came up with, because
Right, so I just want to make sure you have the correct information.
Well, that would
You're asking
be-
different
yeah.
boards for their input.
Yeah.
yeah,
we wanted to originate.
if it's the same as, B2, then it does require business on the ground floor and residential above,
Well,
but
it's full permitted uses in the B2, so I don't know how you guys interpret.
I don't know
It's
either.
not
We'd
wrong.
have to, we could schedule a meeting with Alex and myself and go through it, so.
So, if I'm understanding correctly, residential is permitted, certain commercials permitted, but the both combined are not permitted.
No, that's
No.
I don't want to mislead you. I think that the planning and building department needs to work out that.
I
What's
guess-
permitted, what's
Yeah.
required,
Exactly.
may be very different.
So what we're saying here is you guys would be a thumbs up to keep going, or a thumbs down to like, no, and I think that's why we came to do.
Yeah, and to find out, I mean, what's permitted.
Right.
And it's, in my defense, a lot of times, unless I've actually worked numerous projects in the town or the village, you read the zoning, but it's unclear, and a lot of zones refer back to other uses that are permitted in other zones. And so I often find that as much as I think I might know, I don't know for sure until I.
So quick read here, and I would want to confirm with the building inspector, but it says multifamily dwellings are allowed with special use. So I would read that as you don't have to have mixed use. But I want to do a little deeper dive into the code to be sure I understand the specifics, but we could certainly schedule a meeting. It could even be by Zoom. It doesn't have to be in person, but if you want to come in person, yeah. But in terms of just general feedback from the board,
Well,
yeah.
I'm talking.
No, I mean, I'm definitely, look, I like the concepts of, doing things closer to the street, but I don't necessarily know that makes the most sense in this neighborhood. I mean, there might be a lot of different ways that you could situate a residential place that would complement the town and country, which is right behind there, that you could even do it perpendicular to the street in a way. I'm not at all opposed. I know probably in an ideal world, the brewery parking lot is always full, but I think it's great to try to use space in good ways, and we do need housing.
Rachel?
Would you consider putting some trees in there? I mean, I'm always more likely to be in favor of something that doesn't cut trees down. And
We would do a
in
landscape.
favor, you meant the tree plan, putting trees in and put the tree in. You know, man lives for trees. Okay? Well, yeah, there's an awful lot of that. So that might be the thing. So yeah, we love trees. No, I think. I don't know, I'm sort of mixed feelings about the building being set back, you think it's better to have the parking in front? I think, I don't know, I mean, it's better from like the street. I don't know, I feel like it's, I don't know, I don't know what to say.
I don't want to speak out of turn, but you know that you were saying with the road and then the drop off. So originally the front where there's a little sitting area that was given from the property was given, that property was given because it's a nice little flat spot. The rest of it is obviously not really usable because we were talking there and I would have loved parking through there. But there's just no way we could.
There's no
But,
way, on the other side of.
We would love to donate it to the
No way.
town, the rest of it, the whole strip, and give it to the town to, because it really is of no use to us.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
well, part of it is floodplain, but not all of it. I don't know.
Yeah, so you could have the rest, like there, if you look at that flat area, it goes up a little ways, you could
Yeah.
actually make that larger, that area, but you can't.
Yeah,
That's
not
really-
available.
Okay.
It's not available.
And you don't really want people walking across the street anyway.
The
That street, people fly again.
Ridge,
Oh.
River Ridge Trail there. You don't wanna have, you wanna look across the river. to
Yeah.
this Green Bank,
Yeah,
you don't wanna look across to a park.
yeah, yeah.
Well, I think what you're suggesting is to give that strip to the village, right?
Yeah, and I didn't mean to take the trees down, I just meant if you could clear out a little area so that they can park, but you can't.
Perhaps the only issue might be with that is we'd have to do the dimensions. You might want to do an easement to the village rather than actually give the land, because then you might run into problems with having enough density and or too much density and acreage. But all that can be figured out. That's just math. Yeah, yeah.
So I would recommend playing around a little with ideas on how to situate it, I'm not married, but I would encourage you to move forward but get clarification on what it is. I can't make any guarantee. It's not, but yeah, I think we need housing because we need a diversity of housing, so.
It does appear, and I can find out tomorrow, it does appear that you can do just housing there from what I'm reading, but I want to make sure the building inspector agrees with me.
Yeah.
Yeah. It doesn't look like you could do a laundromat, but I could be wrong. Yeah.
For the residents.
No, it's a-
Because there's not, we know there's one, but I don't.
Well, an amenity for the residents, that would be fine, but as a public laundromat, that would be a use.
Right.
Yeah.
We were just trying to think of what would be good for the town, to help the town, to keep the residents in, you know what I mean? Keep your revenue in your town. And have, people.
And your thought is to subdivide it so that they would
Yes.
become two
They
separate.
would be two separate parcels. So we think the legal can meet the zoning, and of course, so if and when it got built. And they decided they wanted to keep the brewery and sell this, or keep this and sell that, they would be on two separate parcels.
Would you keep, would there be a separate entrance to each parcel?
Yes.
I think there are two entrances.
There are right now. Yeah.
We would definitely propose one for the new building.
And that's a village street, right?
Yes, it is. No, that's a village street.
And there's currently a sidewalk that goes right up along there, right? That was.
Yes.
Was said, yes.
Yes, there is.
Yeah.
This is, like I said, once we move forward, assuming that we move forward, we'll have an updated survey.
No, of
So it'll
course.
show everything that's existing.
Well, I agree with my colleagues. I think it's a good idea to move ahead with it. And look forward to you coming back and hopefully we can present a whole plan to us. That'd be great.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Take care.
You'll get it and make it.
Yeah,
John?
John, if you just want to either give me a call tomorrow afternoon or shoot me an email and I'll get with Alex and see what we can figure out. So
Okay, I think I have your email.
you do. We email back and forth. So
So I'll
Yep.
send you an email.
great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh.
I don't think I have.
That's the last thing, right?
That is the last item.
Second.
All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, hearing none, we are adjourned.
Wonderful.